Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you all. I'm Alex Wettreich. I'm the head of revenue at Writer, and we have been fortunate enough to work with a number of large enterprises as they've gone through their generative AI journey. And I'll give a bit of an intro on what we do so you can help understand the business case they've been trying to make, and then some of the tips that we've learned from them in how they were successfully able to do that. We've worked with companies across industries like financial services, healthcare, retail, tech, CPG. Been doing it for 3 years. So we were doing this before it was cool. What these customers have been attempting to kind of sell into their organizations is our platform, which is a secure full stack platform to build generative AI into any business process. So we're bringing together our own language models that we built from scratch, some of which you can download on Hugging Face, including some industry-specific ones that can be installed on their infrastructure or managed by us, a productized training process with full APIs, a knowledge graph, which is similar to a vector database, but it's what allows them to bring their own data in and have it inform the output of the LLMs. Composable UIs for building UIs for the business, right? Maybe it's a chatbot, but maybe it's templatized UI that's specific to each business case. And then baking the guardrails in, not just around compliance and bias, but brand, tone of voice, all those things that, depending on the use case, might be important to getting to that kind of 4 nines of quality that the business will need to see to really embrace it. And then lots of pre-built integrations into common work, applications that a team might be using in any given scenario. And so I wanted to share 7 of the learnings we've seen from how these customers built that business case, and customers who are seeing real life business impact from their projects, which is obviously what everyone here is trying to do. So we'll go into these in more detail. But as you think through the business case, these are some of the learnings we've had. Transformational, not incremental. Get out of the sandbox. Think cross-functionally. Identify use cases that matter to leadership. Think through all the requirements and identify all the business impact. And then identify and mitigate risks. And we'll unpack some of these with some examples from our customers and how they've gone about doing these things. So I'll start with transformational, not incremental. These are quotes that a technology leader at an investment bank was told by his CIO last week. And he got on the phone with us and said, I was told, don't bring me anything that isn't transformational, not interested in incremental improvement. Oh, and also, by the way, don't bring me anything that can't also be in place in 6 months. So that's a challenge. Actually, we were glad to hear that because it aligns with our value proposition of kind of accelerating that process of knitting together the various pieces that are involved in productizing a generative AI application. But the thing that we're fortunate to have found with our customers is folks like United Healthcare, the CMO of Optum Insight, the work that she's doing to improve productivity was able to quantify it at saving 7.5 hours per week per person. And United Healthcare have initiatives around what they call headcount avoidance and improved productivity. They're board level initiatives, right? So being able to save meaningful amounts of time on the team and free those people up to do higher value things was directly related to what her leadership were asking her to do around current initiatives. And so it wasn't a science project. When you're freeing up 19% of your team's time, that's meaningful. So obviously, it all starts with the use cases, but identifying use cases that have the potential to be transformational is certainly the first step in getting a business case approved. Second learning, get out of the sandbox. So what we've heard from customers is that piecemeal work on elements of an application or elements of it are make it hard to get learnings. They're tempting because they may be lower risk, or you can kind of do them with a lot of interference or visibility, but that can actually work against you. And so what our customers have told us is, as folks like Han Wen, the chief digital officer at L'Oreal, and Nitin Tandon, the CIO at Vanguard, made sure that they were encouraging their teams to bring them use cases that could be deployed in production, addressing actual business goals to learn faster. You're going to learn faster if there's things at stake here, right? And if more people are involved, it also increases the visibility of your work. So for technology leaders, we definitely encourage you to partner with line of business to identify actual use cases and scenarios that they're open to getting into production, to learn quicker and de-risk success and increase visibility. And then for business leaders, make sure to reach out to your AI organization or your IT organization and partner with them. They'll be able to bring in potentially internal data that can help improve your results and ensure quality. And also, thinking ahead, it won't be long before we're going to have dozens, if not hundreds, of generative AI applications at play in your enterprise. And it won't be too long before the world shifts from let's try a bunch of stuff to how did we end up with 25 different platforms doing this in the organization? We need to consolidate. And if you're a business leader who has an application that you think it could be really powerful for you, you don't want to build on a solution that is going to get consolidated. So reach out to your AI org, loop them into what you're trying to do, and help them understand what you're looking for so that can be factored into the ultimate evaluation of what will be in the portfolio of generative AI tool sets when they eventually get to that point. Third, thinking cross-functionally. This is especially for on the business side, being able to identify where there are similar or not similar use cases in other organizations that might be able to leverage the same platforms or same data sets can help you. First of all, it might be able to help you from a cost standpoint to split budget for any of the vendors or tools that you need across different functions, have a larger business impact and a larger ROI. That is obviously what everyone wants to be able to show. And again, align better with your CIO's overall long-term strategy to have a handful of trusted and proven AI vendors and not vendor sprawl. So these are some examples of use cases that we see across the organization. And there's plenty of them. Coming up with use cases usually is an issue. Identifying which ones are impactful is typically bigger. But we often encourage customers to think across three kind of approaches. Create and edit use cases, so generating content or editing content. Transform and repurpose, so that could be personalizing existing content to different audiences on the go-to-market side. It could be taking product requirements documents or subject matter expert content that's maybe overly technical for different audiences internally and being able to simplify that or version that. And then analyze and research, so obviously querying your own data in a more accessible way. So those are kind of useful ways to sort of bucket potential use cases and stimulate people's thinking within different organizations you might be working with to identify use cases that might matter to them. The fourth, use cases that matter to leadership. So they're identifying, starting with your company's key initiatives is something that we strongly recommend customers do, and our most successful customers sort of did automatically, right? Start with what is your leadership talking about in your all hands? What are they talking about on their earnings calls? And find ways to make sure that what you're working on ladders up to those in some way, and frame it around those, because it makes all the difference in the world to say, this AI project or use case that we're evaluating and spending time and resources on directly impacts the things that you're accountable for and that you've laid out as part of your strategy. So, for example, Victoria's Secret is a customer of ours, and they had identified that a key vector for their growth strategy was improving non-branded search traffic. And they had identified a way that they thought that it's a changed approach to their SEO practices on product pages. They have obviously thousands of products, would move the needle on that strategy. But updating 6,000 or more product pages is quite a daunting task, especially when you're doing it with human writers who don't exactly enjoy getting product name, fabric, and a color, and trying to make something compelling and performative from that day in, day out, right? And so what they decided to do was worked with us to provide a handful of examples, and we're able to build what we call a custom template that was dialed in on those. And so then they did a test. They said, we're going to have writers AI generate 100 product descriptions. We're going to have the humans write 100 product descriptions, and we're going to have writer generate 100 and have the humans touch them up, right? And they put those in market, and what they found was the most performative were the ones that were drafted by the AI and then edited by the humans. But the versions that were drafted by the AI also performed really well. So what that allowed them to do was immediately update 6,000 product descriptions, which they pushed through our API to have them rewritten, publish them, get meaningful lift from them, and then have their writers go back and edit the most important ones. And so they got great results from it. 23% increase in description page click-through rate, which you can imagine is material given the amount of traffic that they get, and a 40% increase in non-branded SEO traffic. So directly impacting something that identified as driving a key initiative for them. And that was significant and a great use case because it tied directly to something that mattered. It wasn't a science project. Okay, so the next one is thinking through all the requirements. And so this can be a little daunting as well. But one of the ways that we at Ryder think about use case identification and identifying the right technology for the right situation is you've got a number of things that someone like Han at L'Oreal, who's really close to the business, wants out of generative AI applications. They want fast time to value. They want it something that their end users can actually use. They want to be able to integrate into their existing applications and existing workflows so they're not asking people to change what they're doing. And they want the ability to fine tune it to their level of quality, right? If you're the chief digital officer and chief marketing officer at L'Oreal, you care about your brand. You don't want stuff coming out of a model that does not sound like you. Otherwise, you will spend time, your humans will spend time getting that stuff whipped into shape or it's not getting published. And then you want to make sure your brand is reflected too. On the CIO side of things, that's important, but you need visibility and governance over the model. You need the appropriate admin and security controls. You need to be able to connect your internal data sources. You want something that's going to apply to a bunch of different use cases and not end up being a point solution that you have to maintain. You want to be really sure you can mitigate hallucination, and you want optionality for your developers to be able to integrate the right tools and use it in a bunch of different contexts. And so some of those things lean more towards, well, let's just use an off-the-shelf application. But then how do you control for what's happening to your data at that point? How do you make sure that that you're able to apply post-processing and the NLP work to be able to get the content dialed in once it's come out? And then if you lean more towards the build your own, you then have to deal with, okay, well, to actually get this thing into production, how long is it going to take to get the model dialed in well enough for this particular use case? Will you need a way to include existing content? Do you have the resources to fine tune everything? Have you costed out what a vector database would look like at scale if you actually put this into production? Those things can get really expensive if they have to be updated and rebuilt on a regular basis. Are you going to build a UI for the business for each specific use case that you have? Or is a chatbot going to be sufficient for what they're trying to do? And do you need to integrate into existing applications? And then multiply that by all the other generative AI applications that you're going to be asked to build over the next 6 to 18 months. And you go, okay, that's a lot to think through. But if you think through some of those things in those situations and you put that into your business case and show you've thought through that process, you'll have a much better chance of getting that green lit. Another quick way to think about this is sometimes it's helpful to think about use cases along a model, a 2x2 of requirements. Like, are these things that have very high requirements around the language itself and its brand alignment and compliance and tone and things like that? Have high requirements about the amount of data that needs to be in there? And then do they have high or low requirements around need to integrate into existing applications, or whether or not a human expert needs to be involved in reviewing either the inputs or the outputs, in which case you're going to need UIs that make sense into the context of that use case. And so sometimes in those latter situations, an LLM probably isn't going to be enough, and you need to provide a way for it to retrieve the right data to ensure accuracy and figure out how you're going to enable the post-processing. And so that's where sometimes a full stack application makes sense. There may be other scenarios where using, Copilot, within Microsoft Suite or building something, assembling something from scratch makes sense. Just a couple more. Identify all the business impact. So we tend to spend a lot of time trying to help customers model out what the ROI is going to be for these use cases. And people obviously focus on productivity gain, right? Reduced amount of time to do X, Y, Z, and that's great. And certainly something you want to think about, along with reduced cost to serve customers. If you've got some kind of support or customer care use case where you can tie that directly to fewer tickets, ticket deflection, or quicker resolution, things like that, the company tends to have a good handle on what it costs them. But there's often we see people kind of forget about if you are meaningfully improving the amount of time that it takes to accomplish these tasks, what does that enable that team to then go and do that they don't have capacity to do right now? And whether or not those projects have anything to do with what your work is, they would not be possible without the work that you've done. And so the value of that, what you've enabled for the team, the capacity you freed up, the work that gets done with that capacity is also attributable to your AI project. Those are things to think about in addition to the conventional ways that people try to come up with ROI estimates. And the last one, and time I got left, is identify and mitigate risks. So a good business case is forthcoming about where the risks to it come from. And so, I probably don't have to tell anyone here, there's lots of questions around, is your data being used to train other people's models, right? How do you know? There's a lot of fuzziness in the terms of use for a lot of these tools. What training data was used to build the model? Do you have visibility into that? Are you allowed to know that? Can you inspect the weights? Has it been trained on domain-specific data? And will it be able to tie back and cite the sources of claims that it makes? That's where things like a knowledge graph can help. And how does it mitigate hallucination? How does it mitigate bias? What has the vendor or the LLM provider done to make sure that happens? And then how does it work at scale? Like, have you thought about that? And then how do you make sure that people will use it? And are the UIs in place to ensure strong adoption? Or is that something you're kind of punting to later on? The more you think about that now and highlight those risks, the better positioned you'll be. So hopefully that was useful, and happy to talk about this at length. You can come see us in the exhibit hall this afternoon and we'll be there.